Hello, I'm Emma Green and welcome to this episode of the Virtual Engineering Centre podcast, Engineering in Digital. In this episode, we are focusing on entrepreneurship across the Liverpool City region, what is needed for businesses to succeed in today's evolving digital world, and what backing is out there to ensure you are supported every step of the way. According to Invest Liverpool, the COVID-19 pandemic did not slow down ambitious individuals in 2020, as the region saw a record 14,210 new companies registered compared to a smaller 12,658 during 2019, representing an increase of 12.3% despite the uncertain times. Today, we are joined by guest speaker Jonathon Clark, researcher turned business and technology manager turned director and co-founder, working at the Liverpool LEP, leading on Activate project, and now running GDPR Defender and recently announced Liverpool chapter of Startup Grind. Jonathon knows exactly what businesses need and is here to help. So welcome, Johnny, and thank you so much for joining me today. So can you give our listeners a quick introduction to yourself and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. Nice one for having me, Emma. It's a real pleasure. So at the minute, I'm spinning a few different plates, as I'm sure most people are. I'm trying to get my own GDPR startup off the ground, but I'm doing quite a lot of consultancy work as well with different startups, some corporates and some public sector clients, all around the kind of tech and innovation ecosystem. Obviously, my background, how I know you, did a lot of work running Activate, the startup incubator and growth program, and prior to that was doing a lot around the sort of digital transformation piece in the manufacturing industry, working on the LCR4 project and a few other things as well from my time at the LEP. And then before that, before we ever met, I was working in a green tech startup, looking at a really interesting thing actually, but it just doesn't sound it. Ways of making recycling polymers more commercially viable and environmentally friendly. That was off the back of the geography degree that I did.
Brilliant. So your career has taken you from local government to the tech scene. But let's start from the beginning. So what initially interested you about working at the Liverpool LEP, and how did you find the experience early on in your career?
Well, I mean, I was one of that generation that went to university. One, because it was still a bit cheaper than it is now, and two, because the prevalent advice was do something that you enjoy. I really liked languages and I really liked history, but I didn't like the idea of doing like really long form essays or loads and loads of literature work. So my kind of number three was geography. I fancied myself as a little bit of a maybe a proto Greta Thunberg in some ways. And over the 3 years, I really enjoyed all the different things I studied: population, health, demographics. Loved the economic side, really loved the environmental science side. And in the final year of my degree, I wouldn't say I had a crisis, but I remember thinking I'm not actually qualified to do anything with this. And obviously you get all the jokes, don't you, about where you're going to be working with a geography degree. Do you want fries with that, and do you like colouring in and all those sorts of things? But actually I realised that with a little bit of additional experience, that degree placed me perfectly to do something in like the sort of business of science and innovation. And so I ended up working at this small recycling startup. And after 18 months there, I really enjoyed it, but I started to understand, what is small business, how does business work in practice, and I got really hungry to do more. So when the role came up at the LEP on Simon Reed's team, originally to look at the environmental and economic impacts of shale gas extraction, which was obviously a very hot topic at the time, and possibly another hot topic now as we see prices go through the roof. I jumped at it, even though it was only a 3-month contract, and from there just kind of went from strength to strength, really, which I think is a testament to Simon and some of the other team members at the LEP for the kind of the culture of making the work interesting and particularly in what we were doing, putting manufacturers and businesses first and at the centre of local government policy. So naturally going on to the Industry 4.0 stuff, the programs and all the various bits of work and events that I did around that. For me, it was just, it didn't really feel like work. I just enjoyed learning about it, and being able to kind of make a living from it was a bonus. Yeah, as time went on, I enjoyed that, but I felt like I'd done enough on manufacturing, and there's a lot of government support there because it's a big part of the British identity. And I just got more and more interested in the pure tech side of things to do with startups. And, you know, I'd been out to California for quite a few weeks, for a month, 5 weeks, during my degree, and seeing Silicon Valley and stuff. And I just became really enamored by it. It's got, you know, just the whole culture of, not like hustle, but, you know, entrepreneurship and building something that can go huge and change the world. Just, I found myself drawn to it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really interesting as well, you say how you found your skills, maybe you didn't think initially they could be placed in this type of career that you've gone on to have. But then obviously there's the digital skills gap that we will talk about within manufacturing and industry. And it's having those transferable skills that you've got the experience of in your own life and your own career. But yeah, so then you've gone on after Liverpool LEP to lead on the LTF Activate project, which was an ERDF initiative which supported digital and creative businesses across Liverpool City region to grow using emerging technologies. So during the duration of that project, what were the key findings that you found?
It's a tough one. I mean, that 3 years, or just over 3 years, was. At times it felt like a lot longer than that, and at times it felt like it was just going by in the kind of in the blink of an eye. You know, that project was huge for me, and that whole period of my life, my personal life, some of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, you know, was a big change for me. It was also the first time I had to step up and manage such a big team, and work in a university environment as well, which, you know, as you know, it's got its own particular culture and quirks. I think, you know, the first thing to note is that absolutely everybody that worked on that project, either for the duration or just for people who worked in parts, every single individual was absolutely phenomenal. But it was a complex project, and we really tried to do something different compared to a lot of the sort of traditional business support projects. And that came about because the initial kind of hypothesis wasn't wrong, but didn't have the sort of uptake that we thought. So, you know, obviously within LJMU and other universities, there's massive strengths in the academic base around AI, you know, data science, network, and all the different kind of buzzwords that, you know, you name it, they do it. And there's fantastic resource there. But you know, as with any of these kind of public funded projects, you've got big output targets to make, and the problem was more on the demand side. There wasn't the demand of or the volume of companies that, you know, 150 of them needing AI or you know, another particular technology. So, you know, we had to be really agile about how we did stuff, and really we kind of morphed it into more of an early stage business incubator and accelerator. But without physical sort of space for the business to be in. And what we noticed straight away is that there were a huge amount of kind of really high potential, sort of non-sexy businesses, you know, that might not be doing AI and might not be doing virtual and augmented reality, but actually they're solving quite big problems in the, you know, in the finance space or the education space or, you know, any other sector. And, you know, they're absolutely the future of the digital creative and tech economy of the city. I wholeheartedly believe that. You know, at the time, some of those businesses only had 2 or 3 staff, or were just founders. And now, 3-4 years on, some of these businesses are raising millions of pounds in you know, seed and Series A. They're employing 20-30 staff. And again, you know, if you compare those numbers to some of the big manufacturing businesses and stuff that you'll be more familiar working with, you know, it doesn't sound that impressive, but it's kind of investing in them early to facilitate that massive growth. And, you know, I think, you know, in the next 5 and 6, and certainly within the next 10 years, our hypothesis about supporting them will be proved correct, and that it was the right thing to do to take quite a big risky gamble on those early stage businesses. the Tech Climbers report kind of summed up a lot of what we saw were the runners and riders and the movers and shakers in the sector, but definitely clear strengths in health, tech for good, people building things with kind of a community or social or environmental mentality about using technology to improve people's lives. I think that more than anything is the thing that shone through. And I think the real legacy from that will be that there's, I think tech for good for Liverpool should be associated with it. We should strive to be a UK, a European, and an international hub for assisting entrepreneurs in that space. In the same way that St Helens is famous for glass, or Sheffield for steel, or London for finance, I believe that's our niche.
Brilliant. So with regards to the trends and themes that businesses were coming to, did you find that the barriers that they were facing changed at all over the 3 years, or was it persistently the same type of issues that they were coming up with?
It was largely the same, and the problems aren't unique. It's the same sort of thing that you'll hear entrepreneurs talk about everywhere. So, raising the right type of money, validating the product, getting customers, and hiring people is a big one. The world's getting smaller, and although I'm not one of these people that thinks like the days of the office are gone forever because of the COVID restrictions, it's no secret amongst like local authorities, universities, colleges, economic development organizations, and government that there is a north-south divide in terms of where the talent goes and where the money goes. You do miss out in smaller cities, all the northern cities, really, all the northern powerhouse. You don't have those kind of agglomeration and kind of FOMO effect where there's that many businesses and that many investors. You get a bit of a kind of like a hungry hippos kind of effect of funders trying to get into financing rounds for businesses, and that obviously produces better rates for the entrepreneurs. You don't quite get that here to the same extent that you do in London. You don't quite get that there to the same extent that you do in somewhere like New York or the San Francisco Bay Area. But that doesn't mean that's impossible. It just means that you've got to have a different approach. The other thing that just struck me all the time that I can't really repeat enough is the sort of mentality and the psychology of business owners and founders. Thinking, well, I'm going to sell to all of these X in this local area, and then I'm going to go to the next local area, and having this kind of very linear mental model about the progression of their business. When any industry, but particularly tech, it's a global market. Your customers are global. You need to be going international as soon as possible. I think in most cases, I won't make it an absolute rule. And the same goes for looking for funding and looking for talent. A lot of the best companies I know, their development teams are overseas, their sales teams are overseas. They've got people, one-person offices in key target countries that they know are going to be important in the first few years. And the same with approaching the funding rounds. Again, a lot of the best businesses that I know, and some of the ones that I've been really fortunate to be an angel investor in, there's other investors in there from the Balearic Islands, from the Nordics, from the USA. And these are early stage businesses with, less than like 8 staff. It's just that the mental attitude to how they've approached it is fundamentally different to the sort of prevalent attitude within businesses across the north and within Liverpool.
Yeah, and I think as well, the past couple of years, especially with COVID and lockdowns, and then we're having on the news, we see all the things about the oil supply chains and food supply chains. It's probably never been more important now than to be better connected to other supply chains, international connections, and having that network where you can kind of call each other and pick up the phone, but then also have that support and kind of like a plan B. It's not just one supply one, like you say, one linear chain. You can move around, and also across sectors. It's not just depending on one sector for certain goods as well. That leads us on to the next step, which is GDPR Defender. So how did this come about, and what can you tell us about the changes for business since the Data Protection Act in 2018 is rolled out?
Well, this is where everyone's eyes glaze over, really. It's possibly the kind of most boring business on the planet in some ways, but boring is good. A lot of problems that businesses have are boring, and I'd been working for a while with my co-founder in this venture, Rich Saltz. He's a veteran programmer, been doing startups and consulting, and and also contract work for major companies like IBM for many years. And we were kind of friends more than anything, and we started working on various startup problems together. We'd go into startups and we'd help them sort out. He'd sort out development problems and interim CTO type stuff. I'd help them out with operations, marketing, raising investments. And we were a good little sort of power team doing that. One of the things we picked up on when we were working with less of the startups, more the scale-ups and established SMEs, even if they weren't necessarily high growth or software, was they were holding on to a lot of data. Some of them, like gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of customer data, personal like staff data, other things to do with the business. And one, they weren't really making a lot of use of it. They weren't deriving a lot of value from it. And two, a lot of the time it looked like they weren't actually complying with some of the basic elements of the GDPR, or previously what would have been the Data Protection Act. And we started thinking about this, and I remember, I don't know if you do, when GDPR came in, it was almost a little bit like the Y2K moment. There was loads and loads of hype and fanfare about it. It came in, and then it just all went quiet. It was flat. Yeah. And you hear, every so often, some big corporate's been hacked, or there's a cyber attack, and they didn't tell the ICO fast enough, and now they're going to get fined like millions and millions of pounds. But when we kind of dug into this further, what our kind of angle on this, or our hypothesis on this now, is because the legislation has had time to bed in, it's not just big corporates that this is applicable to, and particularly in the technology sector, where companies are more likely to be dealing with large volumes of data, large volumes of personal data. There's more room for things to go wrong, and we think that the next sort of generation of, I don't know the polite way to phrase it, but ambulance chasers, you remember like the PPI, if you've been missold PPI, we'll claim on your behalf, we'll sue the companies for you. More recently, you've got like the Dieselgate stuff to do with some of the German car manufacturers' emissions testing figures. We think GDPR claims and class action type stuff is going to be the next evolution of this. And it's fine, if you're a major corporate, a big transnational company, you can afford the best lawyers in the world, the best legal counsel, you can afford to pay people off. But if you're an SME, you don't have that resource, you don't have those connections, you don't have the time to put up with those sorts of claims. And so, the best, the best kind of remedy for this is to just become as compliant as possible. Prevention is always going to be better than cure. And although, I would argue that it's actually very difficult to say any company is 100% compliant because of how complex the legislation is in parts. We've developed a suite of products and services, chiefly a software product that runs director teams and directing personnel through a series of kind of questions and process flows that helps them work out where they are on that journey to compliance. So you come to us, we ask you a load of questions, we put you through our software tool, and it'll say, okay, Emma, you and your business, you're a C-. Here's the potential pitfalls you've got right now. Here's the fines and the penalties you might face. Here's what that does to the valuation of your business if you're looking to sell, because the big PE firms are looking at this now as well before they buy the portions of companies. And here's how we get you to an A+. If you want to go there. And then we just offer a suite of support and services around that, be that data protection officers, be that staff training days, cultural kind of awareness and change, behavior change, straight up to kind of policy generation and putting these policies into practice. We do the work, so we're fully integrated. So yeah, quite boring for a lot of businesses, but it's something that affects everyone and they need to be aware of.
Exactly, that's it. And like you said, it's not just the big businesses that these things do affect. And I know you said earlier, every business has boring problems, but that's it. Everyone has these boring problems, and it's something that everybody needs to be compliant with. So your latest venture is the Liverpool chapter of the Startup Grind, an international community to support startup companies. So how did this opportunity come about, and what made you want to get involved?
Yeah, I wonder how I get time to sleep as well. I think, well, first of all, massive shout out to all the Startup Grind team. They do a phenomenal job of supporting chapter directors or aspiring chapter directors like myself in getting set up. But a massive thank you to Katie Nicholson from Founders, Isle of Man, Petra Consultant, who first gave me the idea. She runs the chapter over in the Isle of Man. And for a couple of times it said to me, Liverpool needs something like this. It really ties into that international sort of growth mindset that I talked about before. We have a fantastic early stage startup ecosystem in Liverpool that is undergoing a lot of change right now. And sorry, Liverpool City region, I use them interchangeably now. I'm not in economic development anymore. But yeah, we've got this fantastic early stage ecosystem, and from where I'm sitting, I can see over the next 3 to 5 years with the programs and the funds and the other things that I know about that I can't quite discuss in detail that are coming through. It's going to be quite transformative when you can, especially combine that with the business startup rate within the sector, the kind of anecdotally here, but the number of people I hear from who are leaving other cities, maybe they're coming back from London to start a family, things like that. They've been at a major corporate and they want to come and take that knowledge and start a new tech company. It's just all happening at the right time. And I think what's been lacking is a sort of real community-led organization to bring all that together. And there is some fantastic groups out there already who do really good events around tech. A lot of the big kind of business sector organizations locally have done a really good job over recent years of doing that. But if you look at Startup Grind and you look at the ethos behind it, the mission, the global reach, and kind of all plugging into that San Francisco Bay Area headquarters and the sort of mentality that they have there, it just feels like the right time to launch it. So first and foremost, it's about making friends, not connections. It's working out what value you can provide to other people to develop those reciprocal relationships. And it's about inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs and people to work in tech startups and similar businesses. Because if we don't have that, we don't have the continuity of business for the sector. And I don't feel that you can levy all the responsibility for something like skills or business startup on just universities or just colleges or just chambers and economic development organizations. There has to be kind of a joint, coordinated, collaborative effort. And I think Startup Grind is just the perfect sort of meeting place for all of that to come together under one roof and do it in a fun sort of manner. The main type of event that we do is the fireside chat, and we'll just sit and have a very intimate, honest conversation with an entrepreneur or another interesting figure in the space for 45 minutes to an hour, and some food and drink, and make sure everyone can mingle and talk about it afterwards. Our launch event, I'm going to give it a little bit of a plug. Our launch event is going to be on Thursday, the 14th of October. So a week tomorrow from the time of this recording, 7 p.m. at Chapters of Us. If this goes out before then, I encourage everyone to sign up. Check out our Twitter at SGLpool. There's also a LinkedIn group. If you want to get in touch with me, I can add you to it. But our speaker is going to be Kevin Clayton, the founder and CEO of Parent Apps, who's just been acquired by a bigger organization called Community Brands, both absolutely fantastic companies. Kevin is just one of the most nicest, genuine, down-to-earth people that you can meet. And he's going to be sharing insights about what it was like starting that company 6 years ago, selling into the school sector, which is a difficult sector to sell into. I know a lot of ed tech entrepreneurs out there are going to want to hear some of his insights, and he's going to talk about, you know, how it's changed him as a person along the way, what's been good, what's been bad, and yeah, I think it's going to be a great event to kick everything off, and it's going to set the tone for what we want to do going forwards as well. So hope to see everyone there.
Yeah, and I think it's really helpful for other businesses to hear from other businesses some of the problems that they've had, and they can identify that the same problems, so they don't feel isolated, and they don't doubt themselves. It's like, no, everyone has these issues. It's the same thing, but they can help one another. So what's the response been like so far from businesses across Liverpool?
Really warm, yeah. So, you know, a lot of people have hassled me since I left Activate, and I was working for Tech UK for a bit and stuff, and they were saying, you know, Activate was good as a program, and you know, we had a fund that a lot of people benefited from, but one of the other components that I think was underrated while we were doing it was this sense of community. Inadvertently, we brought a lot of people and businesses together that otherwise might not have come together organically, and people have been looking for something to kind of fill that gap. And I hope that this goes some way towards doing it. We've nearly sold out tickets, so the capacity of the venue is 50, and I think we've got about like 10 tickets remaining. I've not done a massive push yet, so I think those tickets will go pretty quickly. We will look at how we can, you know, accommodate more people as well. But it's been a great response, and I'm really keen to make sure, you know, again, although it's Startup Grind Liverpool, you know, it's absolutely relevant for anyone who has an interest in tech or the sector or startups. You know, whether you're up in, you know, Southport and Sefton, or out in Kirby, or all the way over in like Daresbury, or down at the bottom of the Wirral, or, you know, West Kirby, for example. I think that's like the four corners covered, and everyone in between. You know, the aim is to just have something that really, where people honestly do make friends and kind of mates for life and can work with people on things that they enjoy. And that, you know, I think that's the missing ingredient. Once that starts to come along, I think you'll just see this sort of organic exponential growth within the sector, and you know, and a sprinkling of magic from some other things. But yeah, it's been a great response, and I've just got to kind of deliver on it now as well. So so if you see me, you know, online at 11 p.m. and also 4 a.m., I'm not having a crisis. I'm just trying to make sure that everything gets done in time.
Brilliant. So similar to the LCL4 holistic project, is it correct that Startup Grind isn't restricted to specific sectors or industries across Liverpool? But have you noticed any specific trends for different sector companies, such as type of business support needed or technology, which seems to be popular amongst the different sectors?
Yeah, I mean, so Startup Grind in particular has its own global sort of growth program for startups. It also has some stuff in there for student entrepreneurs as well. People like returning to the tech sector. There's a number of different sort of services that they offer. It's not so much you know, there's a bit of a semantics issue. I think a lot of people who've maybe worked in like traditional business support, or who come from a bit more of an old school kind of business mentality, which I'm not knocking whatsoever. When you say startup to them, they think a startup is literally like a new start business. You know, the kind of terminology we're using here is very much out of West Coast USA, and you know, by that measure, you know, Deliveroo, even though it's IPO'd and employs, you know, hundreds, arguably thousands of staff, and as you know, hundreds of millions in revenue, that's still kind of a startup. It's referring more to the business model of the company and the kind of massive exponential growth trajectory. So there is a focus, I would say, not so much on any one sector. You know, you could be in robotics, you could be in deep tech, you could be just in like digital services, or, you know, providing your own kind of like digital marketing support as a consultant. It's more about the kind of the community that forms around these super high growth businesses, and the kind of infrastructure, physical and virtual, that they need. So that's, you know, a particular supply of talent, engineers, product managers, salespeople, you know, leaders, and then, you know, the other stuff around it. So finance, angels, VC, private equity, and all the support and services as well. So it's not so much a sectoral kind of thing, but it's more about the mentality, the psychology, the attitude, and above all, the community.
So just to finish on, what would be your top tips and advice for businesses in the region?
It's always a tough one, because if there was one set of answers that any speaker or anyone who does anything like this could give to entrepreneurs to kind of help them out, then there wouldn't be much content, would there? Because it'd just be one thing. I always hesitate to use the word rules as well, because it might work 99.99% of the time, but you could be that one business where if you do it a little bit differently and bend the rules or break it, it could work for you. I think, try and seek out really good advice before you make decisions where possible, and look for people who've done it before. But ultimately, you've got to, I've kind of swayed with this and gone full circle in the way I think about these things to some extent. So I'm probably contradicting stuff I've said 2-3 years ago. But you've got to really be kind of passionate about what you do if you're going to really kind of put every hour of the day into it. But the counter to that is, don't think that all the hustle porn is good. Staying up 18, 19 hours a day and crafting this self-image of, look at me, I'm juggling my job and my startup. That's not sustainable. You're going to burn out, and you're going to be miserable, and that's going to take its toll on your well-being as well. So I think everything is personalized, everything is bespoke. There's loads of programs and support out there at your local level, with the fantastic work that you guys are doing with 4.0 and Start and Holistic. There's loads of other more general commercial stuff that businesses can use, and there's a ton from government as well. Innovate UK support, things like that. I think you need to sit down if you're a founder and just really think about the time involved, what time you've got, what skills you've got, what team can you assemble, and what is the idea? There's a ton of business books out there that you can recommend and that everyone talks about. But I think what's really missing is the application. It doesn't matter how many times you read some of these books. It's like, if you don't put it into practice and you don't understand how it translates into what you're doing, then it's pointless. It's just going to gather, it's a signal. It's just like, look at me, I'm well read. Well, that's good, but if you're not taking anything from it, what's the point? Love what you do, put effort in, and just try and develop really sound judgment. Play long-term games, and you stick at it, because a lot of the time these things have a habit of not going anywhere for like a couple of years, and then all of a sudden just going exponential, with real compound growth. That's probably the best I can do in a short space of time.
No, I mean, that's great, because you hear all these stories, don't you, about some of the most successful people in the world, and then you hear the backup stories of like their background and when they were younger, and it was the knockbacks and declines they've had, even like things about people who've written books, and it's like publishers have all kicked them back, and then they've gone on to be some of the best authors in the world that everybody worldwide knows. So I think it's one of those, isn't it? Like you said, persevere and just stick with it, and as long as you're passionate about it, I think it will happen, because you will put the work in regardless.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So unfortunately, that is all we have time for, I'm afraid. But a huge thanks again, Johnny, for joining us today, and we wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Emma.
Thanks again to all of our listeners for tuning in, and join us next time at the Virtual Engineering Centre podcast, Engineering in Digital.